The plane touched down in Knoxville 40 minutes late. Andrew Mercer pulled his carry-on from the overhead bin and walked through the terminal with the same measured pace he used for everything else. 2 weeks in Chicago had drained him. Conference rooms full of logistics executives talking in circles about supply chain optimization. Hotel beds that felt like cardboard. Room service that cost more than he spent on groceries in a week back home. That he wanted his own bed, his own coffee maker, his wife. The cab dropped him at the curb of their modest 2-story house on Maple Street. October air carried the smell of burning leaves and wood smoke. Normal. Peaceful. He paid the driver and grabbed his suitcase. Andrew, Fern Maddox, rushed across the yard from next door. Her gray hair bounced with each quick step. She carried something in her arms. Something small and wrapped in a pink blanket. Thank goodness you're back. Fern's voice cracked. She's been sweet as pie, but I didn't know what to tell her about when you'd be home. Andrew stopped walking. What are you talking about? Fern shifted the bundle in her arms. A tiny face peeked out from the blanket. Dark hair, eyes that weren't quite open. A baby. Pauline said you needed space. Fern said that you were angry about the baby. But honey, she's beautiful. She just sleeps and eats and... What baby? The words came out flat. Cold. Andrew felt something twist in his chest. Fern's face went white. Oh my lord. Fern's voice dropped to a whisper. You don't know. Andrew looked at the house. Pauline's car wasn't in the driveway. The front porch light was off. No movement behind the windows. How long have you had her? He asked. 3 days now. Pauline brought her over Tuesday morning. Said she had to run errands and asked if I could watch her for a few hours. Fern's hands trembled as she held the baby. That was 3 days ago, Andrew. I haven't seen her since. Andrew took the baby from Fern's arms. The child was warm. Real. She smelled like powder and something else he couldn't place. Not Pauline's perfume. Not anything familiar. Did she say anything else? Just that you two had been fighting about the baby. That you didn't want her around. I thought maybe you needed time to cool off. Fern wrung her hands. Andrew, where's Pauline? He didn't answer. He walked to the front door and tried the handle. Locked. He fumbled for his keys with one hand while balancing the baby with the other. The lock turned. The door swung open. The house felt empty before he even stepped inside. Andrew flipped on the living room light. The couch was still there. The coffee table. The TV mounted on the wall. But gaps showed where things used to be. The jewelry box that sat on the mantel. The framed photo of their wedding day. Small things that added up to something bigger. He carried the baby upstairs to their bedroom. The closet door hung open. Half the hangers were empty. Pauline's side of the dresser was cleared out. Her makeup bag was gone from the bathroom counter. The baby stirred in his arms and made a small sound. Not crying, just awake. Andrew walked back downstairs and set the baby in her carrier on the kitchen counter. Fern must have brought it over. He opened the refrigerator. Half empty. He checked the pantry. Same thing. His laptop sat on the kitchen table where he'd left it 2 weeks ago. He opened it and logged into their joint bank account. The balance showed $37.16. 2 weeks ago, there had been $8,423. Andrew stared at the screen. He pulled up the transaction history. Pauline had made a series of withdrawals. Small amounts at first. 50 here, 100 there, then larger chunks. 500, 1,000, 3,000. The last withdrawal had been Tuesday morning. $2,500. The same day she dropped the baby with Fern, he opened a new browser window and checked their savings account. Empty. The emergency fund they'd built over 3 years. Gone. Andrew picked up his phone and dialed Sheriff Marnie Bose. They'd gone to high school together. She'd been Marnie Jenkins then. Played basketball. Dated the quarterback. Now she ran Knox County law enforcement with the same intensity she'd brought to free throws. Bose. Marnie, it's Andrew Mercer. Andrew. Hell, I heard you were in Chicago. How was it? I need to file a missing person report. Silence on the other end. Then, who's missing? My wife. Pauline. She's been gone for 3 days. 3 days isn't very long, Andrew. You sure she didn't just go visit her sister in Nashville? She doesn't have a sister in Nashville. And she cleaned out our bank accounts before she left. Marnie's tone shifted. I'll be right over. Marnie arrived 20 minutes later. She wore her uniform, but no hat. Her graying hair was pulled back in a tight bun. She had the same sharp eyes she'd had at 17, but now they were lined with the kind of experience that came from 20 years of law enforcement. "So walk me through it," she said, pulling out a notepad. Andrew told her about coming home, about Fern and the baby, about the missing money and clothes. Marnie wrote it all down without looking up. Any signs of struggle? Forced entry? No. She packed. Took her time. "You two been having problems." Andrew looked at the baby sleeping in her carrier. "I thought we were fine. What about the baby? She yours?" "I don't know." Marnie raised an eyebrow. "You don't know if your wife had a baby?" "I've been traveling for work. A lot. If she was pregnant, she didn't tell me." "When's the last time you two were together?" Andrew thought about it. Really thought about it. 4 months ago. Maybe 5. "And the baby looks how old to you?" "I don't know anything about babies." Marnie walked over to the carrier and looked down at the sleeping child. "I'd say maybe 3 weeks old. Maybe a month." The math didn't work. Andrew felt something cold settle in his stomach. "We'll need to run DNA tests," Marnie said, "on both you and the baby. And we'll need to check if there's any hospital record of the birth. What happens to her in the meantime? The baby? Child services will have to get involved. Unless you want to take temporary custody." Andrew looked at the baby again. She'd been used as a weapon, dropped like garbage when Pauline decided to run. But she was here, real, breathing. "I'll take her." The next morning, Andrew sat in the waiting room of Knox County Children's Services with the baby in his lap. She'd woken up 3 times during the night. Each time, he'd managed to feed her with the formula Fern had brought over, change her diaper, rocked her back to sleep. He'd never done any of it before, but it wasn't rocket science. Linda Hayes, the caseworker, was a thin woman with kind eyes and tired hands. She'd been doing this job for 15 years and had seen everything twice. "The hospital has no record of a birth," she said, sitting across from Andrew. "No Pauline Mercer. No baby born in the last 6 weeks that matches her description." "What does that mean?" "Could be a home birth. Could be she gave birth somewhere else. Could be the baby isn't hers biologically." Linda leaned forward. "Mr. Mercer, I have to ask, is there any chance your wife was involved in something illegal? Baby trafficking? Adoption fraud?" Andrew shook his head. "Pauline's not a criminal. She's just selfish. The DNA results will tell us more. Until then, you're approved for temporary guardianship. But if this baby isn't biologically related to either of you, things get complicated." Andrew signed the paperwork. Temporary guardianship of an unnamed female infant, approximately 4 weeks old. He'd have to pick a name for the forms. Something simple. "Aster," he said. "Excuse me. Her name. Aster." Linda wrote it down. "That's pretty. Any particular reason?" Andrew looked at the baby. Flowers that bloom late in the season, when everything else is dying. 2 days later, the DNA results came back. Dr. Rebecca Torres called Andrew at work to deliver the news. He stepped outside the logistics center and took the call in his truck. "The baby is biologically your wife's," Dr. Torres said. "No question about that. But she's not yours, Mr. Mercer." "I'm sorry." Andrew felt nothing. No surprise. No anger. Just the cold satisfaction of having the math confirmed. He'd suspected it from the moment Fern handed him the baby. The timing had never worked. The secrecy had never made sense. "How sure are you?" 100%. "This child is not your biological daughter." Andrew hung up and stared across the parking lot. Workers were loading trucks for afternoon deliveries. Normal people doing normal jobs. Living normal lives where wives didn't disappear with other men's babies and stolen money. Pauline had been pregnant, had given birth, had passed the baby off as his and then run when she couldn't maintain the lie anymore. She'd calculated every move except one. She'd assumed he would reject the child when he learned the truth. Andrew started his truck and drove back to the house. Fern was in the front yard raking leaves while Aster slept in her carrier on a blanket under the oak tree. "How'd it go?" Fern asked, leaning on a rake. "The baby isn't mine." Fern stopped raking. "Oh, Andrew. I'm sorry. Don't be. What happens now? Will they take her away?" Andrew looked at Aster sleeping peacefully in the dappled sunlight. Her tiny fist was curled around the edge of her blanket. She'd gained weight since Pauline left. Her cheeks were fuller. Her color was better. "Not if I can help it." He called Linda Hayes and told her the results. She was quiet for a long moment. Andrew could hear papers shuffling in the background, a phone ringing in another office. The sounds of a system trying to process a situation that didn't fit normal categories. This changes things, she finally said. The biological father has rights. We'll need to try to identify him. What if I want to adopt her? Mr. Mercer, this baby isn't your responsibility. You've already done more than anyone could expect. The state can find her a good home. A proper family. She has a proper family. You know what I mean? A married couple. 2 parents. Financial stability. I have financial stability. That's not the point. You're a single man who's been betrayed by his wife. You're dealing with trauma. Making major life decisions right now might not be wise. Andrew watched Aster sleep in her carrier beside his desk. She developed a routine. Fed every 3 hours. Napped twice a day. Bath time at 7. Bedtime at 8. Simple needs that he'd learned to meet. Ms. Hayes, I've been thinking clearly about this for 2 weeks. I want to adopt her. Why? And please don't tell me it's because you love her. You've known her for 2 weeks. Because she's been used as a weapon. Because she was abandoned by someone who was supposed to protect her. Because she deserves better than being rejected twice. Linda Hayes sighed. Mr. Mercer, adoption is a lifelong commitment. 18 years minimum. College expenses. Medical bills. Teenage drama. Are you prepared for all of that? Are any parents prepared for all of that? Fair point. But most parents have 9 months to get ready. You had this dropped on you overnight. I'm ready now. The courts will want to do a full investigation. Home study. Background checks. Psychological evaluation. It could take months. Then we better get started. She is now. That evening, Andrew sat on his front porch with Aster in his arms. October had turned to November. The oak trees were bare. The air carried the promise of winter. Fern came over with a casserole and sat in the chair next to him. She'd been bringing him dinner every night since Pauline left, claiming he needed to keep his strength up for the baby. You're keeping her, Fern said. It wasn't a question. Pauline didn't want to raise her. She used her. Andrew adjusted the baby's blanket. She was awake and looking around with a curious expression that meant she was taking in everything. She dropped this baby like an empty purse. That's cold, even for you. It's true. Fern studied his face in the porch light. You're not doing this out of love for that child. No. Then why? Andrew looked at Fern. She'd been his neighbor for 6 years. Had watched him and Pauline through their entire marriage. Had probably seen problems he'd missed. Warning signs he'd ignored. Because Pauline didn't think I'd keep her. She thought I'd panic. Send her to the state. Run from the mess. He touched Aster's tiny hand. Her fingers wrapped around his thumb, automatically. That's her mistake. What if the biological father shows up? What if he wants her? Then he can explain where he's been for the last month. He can explain why he let Pauline handle this alone. He can explain why his child was abandoned with a stranger. And if he has good answers, there are no good answers. Not for this. Fern picked up her empty casserole dish and stood. Andrew, you're playing a dangerous game. Using that baby to get back at Pauline. I'm not using her. I'm protecting her. From what? From being abandoned again. From being passed around the system. From growing up thinking she wasn't wanted. Andrew stood and carried Aster toward the front door. From people who think children are disposable. Fern followed him to the door. What happens when she grows up and asks about her mother? I'll tell her the truth. That her mother chose drugs and crime and other men over her own child. That her mother ran when things got difficult. That's going to hurt her. Less than being abandoned twice. Andrew went inside and closed the door. He fed Aster her bottle and put her to bed in the crib he'd set up in his bedroom. She fell asleep quickly. She learned to trust that he would be there when she woke up. That food would come when she was hungry. That someone would hold her when she cried. Basic trust. The foundation of everything that came after. Pauline had shattered it with her own child, and Andrew was rebuilding it one day at a time. 3 weeks later, Andrew sat in family court with a lawyer named Jim Carver. Carver was 60 years old and had handled more custody cases than anyone else in Knox County. He wore cheap suits and drove a 15-year-old Honda, but he knew the law like a mechanic knew engines. The biological father has to be notified, Judge Patricia Winters said from the bench. We can't proceed with adoption until we've made reasonable efforts to identify and contact him. Your Honor, Carver said, my client has been the child's primary caregiver for nearly a month. The biological mother abandoned the child with a neighbor and disappeared. The biological father is unknown and may not even know the child exists. That may be true, Mr. Carver, but the law is clear. We need to exhaust all reasonable avenues before we can terminate parental rights. Andrew stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to speak. Judge Winters looked surprised. Mr. Mercer, your attorney can. I understand the law requires you to find the biological father. But while you're looking, this baby needs a home. Stability. I'm providing that. I'll continue to provide that whether you find him or not. Judge Winters studied Andrew for a long moment. Mr. Mercer, adoption is a serious legal commitment. Are you certain you want to take on this responsibility? Yes, Your Honor, even though the child isn't biologically yours, especially because she isn't. The judge raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask for clarification. She granted Andrew continued temporary guardianship with a review scheduled in 60 days. Outside the courthouse, Carver shook his head. That was risky. Judges don't like it when people speak without their lawyers. She needed to hear it from me. What did you mean about especially because she isn't yours? Andrew adjusted Astor's car seat. Pauline thought she could use this baby as leverage. Make me look unstable, unfit, force me to chase after her. He started walking toward his truck. She didn't count on me wanting to keep her. That afternoon, Andrew's phone rang. The caller ID showed a Portland number he recognized. Cousin. Delaney Greer's voice was warm with a slight rasp of someone who'd spent too many years drinking military coffee. Heard you're having some trouble down there. Who told you? Fern called my mom. Mom called me. You know how it works. Delaney paused. You want some help finding your wife? Andrew pulled into his driveway and turned off the engine. She's not my wife anymore. That's what I hoped you'd say. I can be there tomorrow. Delaney arrived the next evening with a laptop bag and a duffel that looked like it had been through 3 tours of duty. She was taller than Andrew remembered, lean and sharp-eyed with graying temples that made her look older than 31. So this is the famous Astor, she said, looking at the baby sleeping in her carrier. She's not famous. She's in our family. Fern's been calling her a miracle baby. Says you're a natural father. Fern exaggerates. Delaney set up her laptop on Andrew's kitchen table and opened 3 different applications. Tell me everything you know about Pauline's disappearance. Start with the money. Andrew walked her through the timeline. The conference. Coming home. The missing money. The DNA results. Delaney typed notes as he talked. She cleaned out the accounts on Tuesday morning, Delaney said, pulling up bank records on her screen. Then nothing. No credit card activity. No ATM withdrawals. She's either using cash or she's using accounts you don't know about. What do we find out? We look for patterns. Digital footprints. Social media activity. Phone records. Delaney's fingers moved across the keyboard. People think they can disappear, but they can't help themselves. They check Facebook. They use their phones. They leave traces. For 3 days, Delaney worked at Andrew's kitchen table while he went to work and came home to take care of Astor. She pulled phone metadata from public sources, tracked geolocation data from social media posts, cross-referenced Venmo payments and Cash App transactions. Her laptop never seemed to sleep. Neither did she. Your wife was careful about some things, Delaney said on Wednesday evening, pulling up a map with red dots marking locations, but sloppy about others. She used different names on social media, but kept the same profile photos. Changed her phone number, but kept using the same apps. Andrew heated a bottle for Astor while watching the screen. What kind of apps? Fitness tracker, grocery store rewards program, Spotify, little things that create patterns. Delaney zoomed in on the map. She's been in Arizona for 3 weeks. Flagstaff area. Consistent location data from multiple sources. What about Frank? That's where it gets interesting. Delaney opened a new window. Frank Harlow updated his Facebook location to Flagstaff 2 weeks ago, but his credit card activity shows he's been there for over a month. They were planning this longer than we thought. Much longer. I found hotel receipts going back 6 weeks. Pauline was making payments to Frank even before you left for Chicago. Andrew fed Aster her bottle and thought about the timeline. She had it all worked out. Wait for me to leave town. Clean out the accounts. Drop the baby with Fern. Run to Arizona with Frank. Except for one thing. What? She expected you to chase her. The hotel reservations show they stayed in places that were easy to find. Cheap motels with online reviews. Frank posted photos on social media with location tags. Delaney scrolled through Facebook posts. They wanted to be found. What? My guess. Drama. Pauline wanted you to show up begging for forgiveness. She wanted to be the victim who was wronged by her cold, distant husband. She wanted Frank to be the hero who rescued her from her terrible marriage. Andrew burped Aster and set her in the carrier on the table. But I didn't chase her. No, you took care of the baby and started building a legal case. That wasn't part of her plan. On Thursday evening, she called Andrew over to the laptop. Found something, she said. Your wife's been making Venmo payments to someone named Frank H. Small amounts. $20 here. $30 there. Going back 4 months. Andrew looked at the screen. A series of payments with cutesy descriptions. Thanks for lunch. Gas money. You're the best. Missing you already. The kind of messages that looked innocent unless you knew what to look for. Frank H. Could be anybody, Andrew said. Could be. But look at this. Delaney opened a new tab. Frank Harlow. Age 45. Manager at the Red Buckle Bar, 15 miles outside Knoxville. Guess when these Venmo payments started? When? Right around the time you started traveling more for work. February 14th, to be exact. Valentine's Day. How romantic. Delaney's voice dripped sarcasm. Your wife started an affair on Valentine's Day while you were working. Andrew studied Frank Harlow's profile picture. The man looked exactly like what he was. Mid-40s bar manager who'd learned to charm women with sad stories and easy promises. Dark hair going gray. Smile that probably worked well in dim lighting after a few drinks. Show me more. Andrew felt the familiar cold sensation in his chest. Show me his picture. Delaney pulled up Frank Harlow's Facebook profile. The man in the photo had dark hair going gray at the temples. Strong jaw. Easy smile. The kind of smile that worked on lonely women in bars. There's more, Delaney said. She scrolled through Frank's photos. 3 months ago, he'd posted a picture from a local park. In the background, barely visible, was a woman with auburn hair sitting on a bench. Pauline's hair. Could be anyone, Andrew said. Could be. But look at this. Delaney opened another tab. A reverse image search of Pauline's profile picture. Your wife's been using a different name on some social media accounts. Paula Ash. Look at her check-ins. Andrew leaned closer to the screen. Paula Ash had checked in at the Red Buckle 17 times in the last 4 months. Always on nights when Andrew was traveling. Son of a bitch, Andrew said quietly. There's more. I found a burner phone number connected to Paula Ash. Track the location data. She's been using it to make calls to Arizona. Flagstaff area. Want to guess who lives in Flagstaff now? Delaney pulled up another Facebook profile. Frank Harlow had updated his location 2 weeks ago. Flagstaff, Arizona. His most recent post was a photo of mountain scenery with the caption, New Adventures. Andrew stared at the screen. They planned this. Looks like it. She's been seeing him for months. They waited until you were out of town, grabbed all the cash they could, and ran. What about the baby? That's the interesting part. Delaney minimized the Facebook tabs and opened a timeline she'd constructed. Based on the DNA results and the baby's age, Pauline got pregnant around the time she started seeing Frank. She carried the baby to term, gave birth somewhere off the grid, and then used her as a prop. Exactly, my guess. She was going to use the baby to make you look unstable. Maybe claim you were abusive. Force you to chase after her while she played the victim. Delaney closed the laptop. But when you didn't panic, when you just took care of the baby instead of freaking out, she realized her plan backfired. Andrew picked up Aster from her carrier. She was awake and looking around with the curious expression babies get when they're trying to focus on faces. She underestimated me, he said. That's her mistake. Andrew took a week off work to think. He sat on his front porch with Aster while Fern brought him coffee and tried to get him to eat. His mind worked through the problem like a logistics puzzle. Variables and outcomes. Cause and effect. Pauline had felt trapped. That much was clear. Comfortable but bored. Safe but restless. She'd married a man who provided stability but not excitement. She'd traded her teaching career for housework and found herself empty. Frank had offered escape. The fantasy of a new life. Adventure. Freedom from responsibility. He'd probably told her she deserved better, that she was too good for small-town Tennessee and a husband who traveled too much. The baby had been leverage, a way to make Andrew look like the bad guy. She'd probably planned to claim he'd abandoned them, maybe even file a restraining order. Paint herself as the victim and him as the heartless bastard who wouldn't support his own child. But she'd miscalculated. She'd expected him to panic, to chase after her, to play the role of desperate husband begging for forgiveness. Instead, he'd taken care of the baby and started building a case. "What are you thinking about?" Fern asked, settling into the chair next to him. "How to win. This isn't a game, Andrew." "Yes, it is." Pauline made the first move. "Now I make mine." "What's your move?" Andrew looked at Astor. She was starting to recognize his face, starting to calm down when he held her, starting to trust him. "I'm going to adopt this baby. Legally bind Pauline's mistake to my control." "That's cold. It's strategic." Jim Carver's office smelled like old coffee and legal documents. Andrew sat across from him with a folder full of evidence. Bank statements, phone records, social media screenshots. Delaney's research had been thorough. "This is impressive detective work," Carver said, flipping through the pages. "But I have to ask what you're hoping to accomplish." "I want to file a civil suit against Pauline for theft and financial fraud." "That's criminal court, not family court." "I know, but a civil suit creates a legal paper trail, makes her visible, blocks her from opening new credit accounts or starting fresh somewhere else." Carver leaned back in his chair. "You want to make her life difficult. I want to make her disappearance expensive." "Andrew, even if you win a civil judgment, collecting on it is another matter entirely. If she doesn't have assets, it's not about the money. It's about the principle." Carver studied Andrew's face. "What's the real goal here?" "I want her to lose more than I did." The civil suit was filed the following week. Theft of marital assets, financial fraud, abandonment of a dependent child. The damages requested were 3 times the amount Pauline had stolen, plus attorney's fees and court costs. Once the suit was filed, Delaney helped Andrew take the next step. They reported the forged financial transactions to law enforcement in Arizona. Anonymous tips to the state attorney general's office. Details about Frank Harlow's criminal background and current activities. "You're building a web," Delaney said, watching Andrew organize the paperwork. "Every legal document, every court filing, every official report makes them more visible to law enforcement." "Good. This is going to take months to play out. Maybe years. I'm patient." Delaney monitored Pauline and Frank's movements through digital surveillance. They were living in a cheap apartment outside Flagstaff. Frank was working at another bar. Pauline had found work at a coffee shop. They were using fake names, but their spending patterns and location data told the real story. "They have no idea their bank accounts are being monitored," Delaney said, "or that the civil suit has triggered a review of their financial activity. How long before it catches up with them? Depends on how many mistakes they make. Frank's got a record. If he gets pulled over for a traffic violation and they run his real name, the warrants will show up." Andrew fed Astor a bottle while Delaney typed on her laptop. The baby was growing, getting stronger, starting to smile when she saw familiar faces. "You really going to keep her?" Delaney asked. "Yes, even after this is all over." Andrew looked down at Astor. She grabbed his finger with her tiny hand and held on tight. She didn't ask for any of this. She deserves better than being abandoned twice. 6 months later, Andrew's life had settled into a routine. Work from 8 to 5. Pick up Astor from Fern's house. Dinner and bath time. Bedtime stories read from books he'd never imagined owning. The adoption paperwork was moving through the courts. Judge Winters had been impressed by his dedication and the stability he'd provided. The civil suit had done its job. Pauline's credit was frozen. Her social security number flagged in financial databases. She couldn't open a bank account or apply for a credit card without triggering alerts. Delaney called from Portland with an update. "They're getting desperate. Frank's been picked up twice for minor violations." Both times he gave false names, but they're starting to pay attention to him. What about Pauline? Working at 3 different places now. Coffee shop in the morning, retail in the afternoon, waitressing at night, living paycheck to paycheck. Good. Andrew, I found something else. Frank's been in contact with some of his old associates. Guys he knew before he went to prison. Word is he's looking for quick money. Andrew felt a familiar cold sensation. What kind of quick money? The kind that gets people arrested. That evening, Andrew made a decision. He called the Arizona State Attorney General's office and spoke to an investigator named Detective Ray Montoya. Andrew identified himself as a victim of financial fraud and provided detailed information about Frank Harlow's whereabouts and activities. We've been watching Mr. Harlow, Detective Montoya said. He's connected to some individuals we've been investigating for identity theft. What does that mean? It means your anonymous tips have been very helpful. We're building a case. Andrew hung up and looked at Astor sleeping in her crib. She was 7 months old now, sitting up on her own, babbling sounds that almost seemed like words. She'd never known any parent except him. Time to finish this, he said quietly. Andrew took another week off work and flew to Phoenix. He rented a car and drove north to Flagstaff. The coffee shop where Pauline worked was called Mountain Grounds. It sat on the edge of downtown in a building that looked like it had been there since the 1960s that he waited across the street until he saw her through the window. Auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a green apron over jeans and a sweater. She looked thinner than he remembered. Tired. Andrew walked into the coffee shop at 10:30 on a Tuesday morning. Only 3 other customers. Pauline was behind the counter wiping down the espresso machine. She looked up when the door chimed. Her face went white. Hello, Pauline. She dropped the cloth she was holding. Andrew, what are you doing here? Getting coffee. He approached the counter slowly. You look surprised to see me. I didn't know you were in Arizona. There's a lot you don't know. Pauline glanced toward the back of the shop where her manager was working in the office. We can't do this here. I'm working. Then we'll make it quick. Andrew pulled out his phone and opened the voice recorder app. I want you to tell me about the baby. What baby? The one you left with my neighbor. The one I've been raising for 7 months. Pauline's hand shook. Andrew, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Start with whose baby she is. She's mine. And the father? Pauline looked around the coffee shop. The other customers weren't paying attention, but she lowered her voice anyway. That's complicated. Frank Harlow, bar manager at the Red Buckle. Criminal record for fraud and theft. Currently living under a false name in apartment 23B at Desert View Apartments. Andrew watched her face. Not complicated at all. How did you? You left quite a trail, Pauline. Bank records. Phone calls. Social media posts. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? Andrew, please. I made mistakes. I know that. But we can work this out. We, you, and me. Yes, we can fix this. Andrew leaned closer to the counter. You drained our bank accounts, abandoned a baby, ran off with another man. And you think we can fix this? People make mistakes. You didn't make a mistake. You made a plan. Andrew's voice stayed calm and level. You planned the affair. You planned the pregnancy. You planned to use that baby as a weapon against me. You planned to steal our money and disappear. Pauline started crying. I felt trapped. I felt like I was dying in that house. So you decided to take me down with you. No, you wanted me to chase you, to beg you to come back, to play the role of the desperate husband who couldn't live without you. Andrew pocketed his phone. But I didn't chase you, did I? Andrew, please. I kept the baby. I filed for adoption. I built a life without you. He stepped back from the counter. You left the wrong person standing. Pauline wiped her eyes with her apron. What do you want? I want you to understand that you lost. Completely. Permanently. Andrew turned toward the door. And I want you to know that I'm not here to take you back. I'm here to make sure you lose more than me. He walked out of the coffee shop and drove to the police station. Detective Ray Montoya was a compact man with gray hair and sharp eyes. He'd been working financial crimes for 12 years and had developed an instinct for when cases were about to break open. Mr. Mercer, he said, shaking Andrew's hand. Thanks for coming in. Has the recording been helpful? Very helpful. Your wife admitted to financial fraud and child abandonment. But we've got bigger problems now. Montoya led Andrew to a conference room where another detective was waiting. Detective Sarah Chun from the Phoenix Police Department. She had a laptop open and files spread across the table. Mr. Harlow's been busy, Detective Chun said. We arrested him last night on a parole violation. Turns out he's been running a credit card scam with 3 other individuals. Identity theft, fraudulent purchases, money laundering. What does that have to do with Pauline? She's been helping him. Knowingly or unknowingly, we're not sure yet. But she's been using stolen credit cards to make purchases. Her signature is on receipts. Her face is on security cameras. Andrew felt something shift in his chest. How serious is this? Federal charge is serious, Detective Montoya said. Identity theft carries a minimum sentence of 2 years. With her husband's record and the financial fraud you've documented, she's looking at 5 to 7 years minimum. What happens now? We arrest her. She gets arraigned. Bail hearing. Trial. Detective Chun closed her laptop. Mr. Harlow's already trying to cut a deal. Wants to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's going to testify against her. Already has. Gave us a full statement this morning. Says the whole thing was her idea. Detective Montoya shook his head. Loyalty among thieves isn't what it used to be. Andrew drove back to Phoenix that evening and caught a red-eye flight to Knoxville. He landed at 6 in the morning and went straight to Fern's house to pick up Astor. How did it go? Fern asked, handing him the baby. Better than expected. Astor reached for his face with both hands. She'd learned to say "dada" while he was gone. It was probably just babbling, but Fern insisted it was intentional. What happens next? We wait. 3 days later, Detective Montoya called with news. Pauline had been arrested and charged with multiple felonies. Identity theft, wire fraud, money laundering, child endangerment. Bail was set at $50,000, which she couldn't pay. She's requesting a public defender, Detective Montoya said. Probably going to plead not guilty and hope for a plea bargain. What are her chances? With Frank Harlow testifying against her? Not good. We've got financial records, security footage, recorded admissions. It's a solid case. Andrew hung up and looked at Astor. She was sitting in her high chair, eating pieces of banana with her fingers. Independent, focused, determined to feed herself even when half the food ended up on the floor. Looks like it's just you and me, he said. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Andrew didn't attend, but he followed the news coverage online. The Knoxville News-Sentinel ran daily updates. Local woman faces federal charges in identity theft ring. Bar manager testifies against former lover in fraud case. Abandoned baby at center of financial crime trial. Pauline's public defender, a tired-looking man named Robert Garcia, tried to argue that she'd been manipulated by Frank Harlow, that she was a victim of emotional abuse and coercion. He painted her as a naive housewife who'd been seduced and exploited by a career criminal. Frank Harlow testified for the prosecution on day 14. He wore an orange jumpsuit and shackles. His hair was shorter and grayer than in his Facebook photos. Prison had aged him. He told the jury that Pauline had been a willing participant in every crime, that she'd suggested some of the fraud schemes herself, that she'd been eager to start a new life with stolen money. She wanted out of her marriage, Frank testified. Said her husband was cold and controlling. Said he traveled all the time and ignored her. She wanted excitement, adventure. She wanted to feel alive again. And how did you provide that? The prosecutor asked. I showed her how to make easy money. Credit card numbers. Identity theft. She was good at it. Careful. Detail-oriented. Did she know these activities were illegal? Of course she knew. She wasn't stupid. She just didn't care. What about the baby? That was her idea. She said having a baby would make her husband look bad if he tried to divorce her. Make her look like the victim. She planned to use the kid as leverage. Leverage for what? Money, custody, sympathy. She had it all figured out. Andrew read the testimony transcript that evening while feeding Astor dinner. She was 11 months old now, walking with help, saying 3 words clearly, "da-da, more," and no. She had opinions about food now. Loved bananas. Hated peas. Threw Cheerios on the floor when she was done eating. The jury deliberated for 6 hours and returned guilty verdicts on all counts. Judge Maria Santos sentenced Pauline to 9 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for the first 4 years. Andrew read the news while feeding Astor dinner. The Knoxville News-Sentinel headline read, "Former teacher sentenced to 9 years in federal identity theft case." Below that, a smaller headline, "Husband gains full custody of abandoned baby." He showed Astor the article photo of herself from 11 months ago, a tiny infant sleeping in a carrier. She looked at the picture with mild interest, then went back to throwing Cheerios on the floor. "That's you," he said. Before. She babbled something that might have been a word and reached for his phone. "And this is you now," he said, tickling her belly. She laughed and grabbed his finger. Strong grip. Determined expression. Nothing like the helpless infant Pauline had abandoned. His phone rang. Jim Carver. "Congratulations," the lawyer said. "The adoption is final. Judge Winters signed the paperwork this afternoon. Astor is legally your daughter." Andrew looked at the baby in her high chair. She was trying to pick up peas with her fingers and getting frustrated when they rolled away. When she finally managed to grab one, she examined it carefully before putting it in her mouth. "Thank you. There's something else. Pauline's parental rights have been officially terminated. She can't contest the adoption, can't claim custody, even after she gets out of prison." "Good. The court was impressed by your stability and commitment." Judge Winters said she'd never seen a more thorough case for adoption. The home study reports, character references, financial records. Everything painted a picture of a man who'd provided a safe, stable home for a child who needed one. Andrew watched Astor successfully eat a pea and clap for herself. She deserved stability. There's one more thing. Pauline's lawyer filed an appeal. They're claiming she didn't receive adequate representation, that Frank Harlow's testimony was coerced. Will it work? Doubtful. The evidence was overwhelming. But appeals can take years to resolve. Doesn't matter. She's not getting out anytime soon either way. That evening, Delaney called from Portland. Saw the news. 9 years. That's serious time. She earned it. How do you feel? Andrew considered the question. Satisfied. Dissatisfied. She gambled on a man who runs. She forgot I never do. Delaney was quiet for a moment. You won, cousin. Completely. Permanently. I know. 6 months later, Andrew sat on a bench at Lakeshore Park watching Astor play in the sandbox. She was walking steadily now and had developed strong opinions about which toys belonged to her. She was fearless and curious and completely unaware that her biological mother was serving time in federal prison. The park was busy for Saturday morning. Families with children, joggers on the trail around the lake, dog walkers and cyclists, normal people living normal lives. Andrew came here every weekend now. Astor loved the sandbox and the swing set. She learned to climb the steps to the small slide by herself. Did I look? Astor held up a bucket full of sand and dumped it out with obvious pride. Good job. She clapped for herself and went back to digging. Independent and determined. She'd inherited Pauline's stubbornness, but none of her need for drama or attention. Maybe that would change as she got older. Maybe not. Mr. Mercer. Andrew looked up to see Sheriff Marnie Bowes approaching. She wore civilian clothes and carried a cup of coffee from the concession stand. Jeans and a Tennessee Volunteer sweatshirt. Off-duty, but still carrying herself with the authority of someone used to being in charge. Mind if I sit? Free country. Marnie settled onto the bench next to him and watched Astor work on filling her bucket again. Cute kid. She looks happy. She is. Heard about the trial. 9 years is a long time. Not long enough. Marnie sipped her coffee and studied Andrew's profile. You handled this better than I expected. What do you mean? Most men in your situation would have gone crazy. Done something stupid. Driven to Arizona and confronted the boyfriend. Made threats. Gotten themselves arrested. She gestured toward Astor. You stayed calm. Methodical. Build a case instead of looking for revenge. Andrew picked up Astor when she toddled over to show him a handful of sand. I had time to think. That's all I ever need. What happens when she gets out? Pauline, I mean. She won't be a problem. How can you be sure? Andrew settled Astor back in the sandbox and watched her return to her digging. She'd found a small plastic shovel that another child had left behind and was using it to move sand from one bucket to another. Focused and methodical. Because she'll be 42 years old with a felony record and no money. Because Frank Harlow will be out by then, and she'll know he betrayed her. Because she'll understand that I kept the one thing she thought she could use against me. The baby. My daughter. Marnie stood up and threw her empty coffee cup in a nearby trash can. You're a hard man, Andrew Mercer. I'm a fair man. Pauline got exactly what she earned. What about forgiveness? Moving on? Letting go of anger. Andrew watched Astor carefully stack sand in her bucket. Patient and deliberate. Working toward a goal only she understood. I'm not angry. Anger is an emotion. This was a problem that needed solving. And now it's solved? Now it's solved. Marnie walked away without saying goodbye. Andrew understood. Law enforcement dealt with victims who wanted justice and perpetrators who deserved punishment. They didn't know what to do with someone who dismantled his enemy using nothing but patience and legal paperwork. As the sun set over Knoxville, Andrew packed up Astor's toys and carried her to his truck. She fell asleep in her car's seat before they reached the house. He carried her inside and put her to bed without waking her up. The house was quiet, peaceful, nothing like the chaos and betrayal of 18 months ago. Andrew made himself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table where Delaney had built her case against Pauline, where he'd learned the truth about Frank Harlow, where he'd planned his methodical response to their betrayal. He pulled out his phone and looked at photos of Astor. Her first smile, her first steps, her first word. A complete record of a life that started with abandonment and grew into something stable and secure that on the counter. A stack of mail included a letter from the federal prison in Arizona. Pauline's first attempt at contact since her arrest. Andrew opened it and read 3 pages of handwritten apologies and explanations. She was sorry. She'd made mistakes. She wanted to see Astor. She wanted to be part of her daughter's life when she got out. Andrew read the letter twice, then tore it into small pieces and threw it in the trash. Some mistakes couldn't be forgiven. Some choices couldn't be undone. Some bridges, once burned, stayed burned forever. Pauline had made one critical error in judgment. She'd assumed Andrew would react emotionally, that he'd chase her or collapse or beg for mercy. She'd built her entire plan around the assumption that he was weak, that she'd been wrong about everything else too. Wrong about Frank's loyalty. Wrong about the legal consequences. Wrong about her ability to disappear and start over. But mostly, she'd been wrong about the baby. Astor wasn't a weapon or a tool or a burden. She was a person who deserved better than being abandoned twice. Andrew had given her stability, safety, and the promise that she'd never be used as leverage against anyone. Tomorrow, he'd go to work, pick up Astor from Fern's house, make dinner, and give her a bath and read her a story before bed. The same routine they'd followed for over a year. The same routine they'd follow for years to come. Pauline was gone. Frank was gone. The money they'd stolen was gone. But Andrew had won the only thing that mattered. That a second letter arrived the following week. Then a third. Andrew threw them away without reading them. Pauline could write all the letters she wanted from her prison cell. He had no obligation to read them. No responsibility to respond. No reason to care about her regrets or her plans for the future. Astor was 15 months old now. She said book when she wanted to read. She said up when she wanted to be held. She said no when she didn't like her food. Simple communication, clear needs, honest emotions, everything Pauline had never been.